Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I worked as a firefighter for about 8 years, moving up to lieutenant at our department. I started as a rookie straight out of the academy, wanting to prove myself in what's still very much a male-dominated field. Our station house is well equipped. We have 2 engines, a 110-foot tower ladder truck that's our pride and joy, plus a chief's vehicle and utility truck. It's a tight crew, and we take care of each other like family. My buddy works as the general manager at a small grocery store about 10 minutes from our station. We've known each other since high school, and he's always been the type to follow rules and treat people with respect. His store sits on a busy corner, and right out front there's a clearly marked space that says "Emergency Vehicles Only" in big red letters. For weeks, my friend had been dealing with this guy who drove a shiny black BMW and seemed to think the emergency parking spot was his personal reserved space. Every Tuesday and Friday, like clockwork, this guy would pull up and park right there while he shopped. My friend had asked him politely several times to move, but the guy just brushed him off. Things came to a head on a Tuesday afternoon when my friend decided to be more direct about it. He walked up to the BMW owner as he was getting out of his car. My friend politely told him that he couldn't park in that spot because it was reserved for emergency vehicles. The guy barely looked up from checking his phone and told my friend to mind his own business. My friend explained that he was minding his business since this was his store and that the spot needed to stay clear for fire trucks and ambulances. That's when the guy really showed his true colors. He straightened up, looked my friend up and down with this disgusted expression, and delivered the insult that would seal his fate. He called my friend a minimum wage nobody and bragged that he could park wherever he wanted because he made more money in a single day than my friend probably saw in a month. He told my friend to back off and let the successful people handle their business. My friend called me that evening, still steaming mad about the whole encounter. I could hear the frustration in his voice when he described how this entitled jerk had talked down to him. Now I've dealt with my fair share of difficult people in this job, but something about this situation really got under my skin. Maybe it was because someone was disrespecting my friend, or maybe it was because this guy was blocking a space that could literally be the difference between life and death in an emergency. Either way, I decided to pay this BMW owner a little visit. The next Friday, I took our utility truck over to the store. It has department decals on the doors and a single red emergency light on the dashboard, clearly marked as a fire department vehicle. Sure enough, there was the black BMW sitting pretty in the emergency vehicle spot. I pulled the utility truck right up behind it and got out. I was maybe 3 steps toward the store entrance when I heard this voice behind me. The BMW guy was shouting that I couldn't park there because that was his spot. I turned around to see the same guy my friend had described, middle-aged, expensive suit, already upset. I explained that I was on official business with the fire department and that my vehicle was authorized to park in emergency vehicle spaces. I pointed to the department decal on my truck door, figuring that would be the end of it. But this guy wasn't backing down. He said he didn't care what the sticker said and claimed I couldn't be a real firefighter anyway because I was just some girl playing dress-up. He demanded I move my truck and get out of his spot before he called the real fire department. Then he called me a word I won't repeat here. That did it. I worked twice as hard as most of my male colleagues to earn respect in this job. I've run into burning buildings, pulled people from car wrecks, and saved lives. I wasn't about to let some entitled jerk in a fancy car diminish all of that. I walked into the store without saying another word, heading straight for my friend's office. He was doing paperwork when I knocked on his doorframe. He thanked God I was there and asked if I had a plan to deal with this guy. I told him I might have an idea forming and asked him to tell me more about the BMW guy's schedule, specifically whether he always parked there at the same times. When my friend filled me in on the BMW guy's routine, I noticed a small notice posted on the wall about the store's fire suppression system. The annual inspection was coming up soon. The wheels started turning in my head. After gathering all the information I needed, I headed back to the station. Our chief is this massive guy, about 6'6" and built like a linebacker. He is Samoan, came up through the ranks the hard way, and treats all of us like his own kids. When someone messes with one of his people, he takes it personally. I knocked on his office door and explained the whole situation, the entitled parking, the disrespect toward my friend, and especially the comments about me not being a real firefighter. The chief said this guy thought he could talk to one of his lieutenants like that and block emergency vehicle access, and that we were gonna have some fun with this one. He called for a station meeting right away. When everyone gathered around, I laid out my plan. The room got quiet when I explained what I had in mind, then slowly grins started spreading across faces. One firefighter asked if he had it straight that we were gonna teach this guy why you don't park in fire lanes. I told him it was an educational demonstration, completely by the book. The chief said he liked it and that next time the guy parked there and my friend called, we'd roll out full response. 2 weeks later, my phone rang during lunch prep. My friend told me the BMW guy was there and had just pulled into the emergency spot like he owned the place. I told him that was perfect timing and to give me 15 minutes. I hung up and immediately hit the station alarm. The sound echoed through the firehouse when everyone dropped what they were doing. I quickly changed into my investigator uniform and turnout gear while explaining the situation to my crew. I told them this was it, and we were doing a full response to the grocery store because we had a fire lane violation impeding emergency vehicle access. We rolled out with engine 1 pulling up front, the tower ladder truck positioning alongside, and me following in the quint. When we arrived on scene, there was the BMW sitting pretty in the emergency vehicle spot, just like expected. I radioed to the engine crew and told them to position directly in front of the BMW while the ladder truck set up its outriggers on the driver's side. The engineers started deploying the ladder truck's stabilizing legs, and I watched with satisfaction when one of the massive steel outriggers came down right on the BMW's hood with a satisfying crunch. The car's alarm started wailing, adding to the chaos. The store's fire alarm was going off right on schedule. My friend had activated it like planned. I walked inside to coordinate with him while he evacuated customers through the back entrance. Outside, I could hear someone shouting over the alarms. The BMW guy had emerged from wherever he'd been and discovered his precious car trapped between a fire engine and a ladder truck, with a nice dent in the hood courtesy of our outrigger. He was screaming about what the hell this was and demanding we get our trucks away from his car right now. I radioed for police backup, explaining that we had someone interfering with fire operations. Then I walked back outside to handle the situation. I told him he needed to step back and let us do our job. The BMW guy screamed that this was our job and that we had done this on purpose. He threatened to sue me, the fire department, and everyone else involved. I explained that his vehicle was illegally parked in an emergency vehicle zone, impeding our response to the fire alarm, and that he needed to move away from the scene immediately. He called this harassment and said he knew his rights. He claimed we couldn't just destroy people's property because we didn't like where they parked. The police arrived just when the guy was working himself into a real frenzy. 3 officers approached, and I quickly briefed them on the situation. One officer asked if his car was blocking emergency vehicle access. I told him it was correct and added that now he was interfering with fire operations. The BMW guy spotted me talking to the police and completely lost it. He pointed at me and shouted that I was the one who orchestrated this whole thing. He demanded the officers arrest me for destruction of property. He started walking toward me, finger pointed accusingly. I held my ground and asked him one more time to step back and let us complete our emergency response. He screamed that the emergency response was nonsense and claimed this was revenge because I hurt his little feelings last week. Then he made his biggest mistake. He got right up in my face and gave me a hard shove backward. I told them that was assault on a firefighter and asked the officers to please arrest this man. The 3 cops moved in immediately, tackling the guy to the ground when he struggled and screamed about his rights. While they got the handcuffs on him, I radioed for a tow truck and requested dispatch send one to our location for a vehicle illegally parked in a fire lane. When the BMW guy was loaded into the back of a police car, still shouting threats, the tow truck arrived. The driver took one look at the crushed hood and the ladder truck's outrigger still deployed and started laughing. He commented that he'd seen cars towed from fire lanes before, but never one that had been properly flattened first. The BMW was hauled away with a satisfying scraping sound when the damaged hood dragged on the asphalt. I completed my incident report, documenting the fire lane violation, the assault on a firefighter, and the interference with emergency operations. 3 months later, I got a call from the prosecutor's office. The BMW guy had been sentenced to 12 months probation for assault and interfering with fire operations. He also got hit with a $500 fine for the illegal parking, had to pay the towing fees, and his insurance refused to cover the damage to his car since it happened while he was committing a violation. I've been into cars and drifting since I was a teenager. My dad got me into it when I was 15, and I've been obsessed ever since. I spent my 20s working construction, saving every penny I could. I had this crazy dream of owning my own drift track, where I could teach people and just enjoy the sport I love. After 10 years of saving and planning, my wife and I finally found the perfect property. It was 500 acres of empty land, way out in the middle of nowhere. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away. It was zoned for commercial, automotive, and residential use. I couldn't have asked for a better setup. We spent 2 years getting all the permits and approvals from the county. Everything was completely legal and above board. I even had plans to eventually open a drift school on the property. While we were waiting for construction to finish, I built 6 high-performance cars from scratch. Each one had about 800 horsepower, mostly using 5.3-liter Chevy engines. I had an older BMW, a newer BMW, a 1996 Silvia, a 2013 Subaru, a 2015 Mustang, and a 2016 Mazda. These weren't just toys. They were professional-grade drift machines. For about 7 or 8 months after we moved in, everything was perfect. We'd run the cars a few times a week, always keeping the noise reasonable and stopping before it got too late. The only problem we'd had was some idiot who trespassed on our property and crashed his car into our shed. But that was just one incident. Then came the holidays. My cousin was visiting with his family, including his 17-year-old son, who had never been drifting before. My cousin and I grew up drifting together, so this was going to be special. We decided to take the kid out and show him what real drifting was all about. We fired up 2 of the track cars and went all out. The kid was having the time of his life, and honestly, so was I. We'd been going for about 40 minutes, swapping tires and pushing the cars to their limits, when I heard sirens. I walked out of the garage and saw something I couldn't believe. 2 fire trucks, 2 police cars, and some guy's SUV were parked at the edge of our property. I walked over to see what was going on. The fire chief told me they'd gotten a call about a possible fire and excessive noise coming from our property. I explained that there was no fire and that the noise was coming from our drift cars. I showed them our professional racetrack and pulled out all my county permits and approvals to prove everything was legal. The sergeant looked everything over and told me that everything looked good. He said we were well within our rights as long as we kept the noise down before 10 p.m. on weekdays and 11 p.m. on weekends. That's when this guy I'd never seen before started losing his mind. He started yelling about how ridiculous this was and that we couldn't just make all this noise whenever we wanted. He said this should be illegal. I told him we'd been here for months and asked if he even lived around here, since I'd never seen him before. He said he lived down the road and was sick of listening to our garbage. The sergeant repeated that we weren't breaking any laws and that our property was properly zoned with all the right permits. The neighbors started screaming and calling us all sorts of names, saying we were just a bunch of degenerate, inbred jerks, and that this was America and he shouldn't have to listen to this crap. Then he turned on the sergeant and started yelling at him too. He told the sergeant that he was supposed to be enforcing the law, not protecting us idiots. The sergeant had heard enough. He told the neighbor he was trespassing on our property and needed to leave immediately. The fire department packed up and left as soon as they realized there was no actual emergency. A couple of the police officers actually stuck around to watch us take a few more runs. I offered to teach them how to drift for free if they ever wanted to learn. They seemed really interested and said they might take me up on it. After everyone left, I felt pretty shaken up. I mean, we'd done everything right. We bought the right property, got all the permits, followed all the rules. I even posted about it online to see if other people thought we were being unreasonable. But the story doesn't end there. 3 days later, the neighbor showed up at our front door. He started pounding on the door around dinner time. When I opened it, he was practically foaming at the mouth. He told me he was there to tell me that I was done racing those cars on my property. I told him this was my property and that everything we were doing was completely legal. He said he didn't care what was legal and that the noise was unacceptable. He threatened that if we didn't stop, he was going to come back and destroy every one of our cars. My wife had called the police as soon as she heard him threatening us. He was still screaming threats when the officers arrived. The police officer told him he needed to calm down and that he was on private property making threats. The neighbor said he didn't care and that we were ruining the neighborhood. The officer told him he was under arrest for trespassing and making threats. They actually arrested him right there on our front porch. Turns out this wasn't his first time causing problems with neighbors. The officers told us he'd been complained about before for similar behavior. After that incident, we installed trail cameras all around our property. We weren't taking any chances with this guy. The cameras covered every possible entry point, so if anyone tried to trespass or mess with our cars, we'd have it all on video. The neighbor tried calling the county a few more times to complain about us, but since we had all the proper permits and weren't violating any noise ordinances, nothing came of it. The county actually sent someone out to verify that our setup was still in compliance, and we passed with flying colors. A few weeks later, I heard from another neighbor who lived about 2 miles away that the crazy neighbor had been arrested again for harassing some other family about their farm equipment. He thought their tractor was too loud when they were working their fields at 6 in the morning. The guy just couldn't handle living in a rural area where people actually use their property. About a month after all this happened, the local police department actually did take me up on my offer to teach them drifting. They brought out a few officers for a training day, and it turned out to be great publicity for our future drift school. Word got around and we started getting calls from people wanting to book lessons before we even officially opened. Now, 6 months later, our drift school is up and running. Back in 2008, I was in my second year at university in Manchester. Money was tight when you're a student, but I'd been saving up for months from my part-time job at a local cafe to buy something I'd been dreaming about, a proper TV for my flat. I was still playing games on my old PlayStation 3 on a tiny monitor I borrowed from a mate, and watching movies on my laptop screen was getting old fast. When I compared prices online, I found a great deal on a 32-inch flat-screen TV at Tesco. It was way cheaper than anywhere else, and they offered free collection from their store. Perfect for a broke student like me. I placed the order online, paid with my debit card, and got the confirmation email. I was buzzing with excitement. The Tesco store was massive, one of those big supercenters. When you walked in through the main entrance, there was a collection area right there where you could pick up online orders. Then if you walked a bit further into the same huge space, you'd reach the actual supermarket section. No walls or anything separating them, just open space. I showed up that Saturday afternoon with my confirmation email printed out. The guy at the collection counter was friendly enough. He checked my email, found my TV in the back, and wheeled out this beautiful 32-inch Samsung still in its original packaging. I was over the moon. The box was heavy, but I managed to get it into one of those big trolleys. Since I was already there, I figured I might as well do my weekly grocery shopping. I needed the basics: bread, milk, some ready meals for the week ahead. I pushed the trolley with my TV and groceries through the store, picking up what I needed. Everything was going smoothly until I got to the checkout. There were only 2 tills open, which was typical for a Saturday afternoon. I chose the shorter queue and started putting my groceries on the conveyor belt. The TV stayed in the trolley since it was too heavy and awkward to lift onto the counter. The cashier, a middle-aged woman with short blonde hair, started scanning my items. Then she stopped and looked at the TV. She asked me what the TV was doing there. I explained that I'd already paid for it by buying it online and collecting it from the collection area. She looked at me suspiciously with narrowed eyes. She wanted to know how she could be sure I hadn't just taken it from their electronics section. I was a bit taken aback by her accusation, but I stayed calm. I showed her my confirmation email that I'd bought it online for collection. She barely looked at it before shaking her head. Then she started shouting that she couldn't read the email and it wasn't a receipt. She said loudly that I couldn't leave with the TV unless I paid for it. She was practically yelling now, and I could feel other customers starting to stare. Her loud voice had that sharp accusatory tone that made my blood pressure rise. I asked if she was serious and pointed out that the email was my proof of purchase. I told her I'd literally just collected it from their collection area 5 minutes ago. She didn't care and said that without a receipt, I couldn't take the TV. That's when I lost it. Being accused of theft when I'd done everything properly really got under my skin. I told her she was being ridiculous because I'd already paid for the TV. I pointed out that there were cameras everywhere and she could check where I got it from. The queue behind me was getting longer and people were starting to mutter complaints. The cashier called for her supervisor, waving her hand frantically. Another woman came over, this one older with gray hair and a stern expression. She asked what the problem was. The cashier explained that I was trying to leave with a TV I hadn't paid for and that I didn't have a receipt. The supervisor looked at me like I was some kind of criminal. She told me that if I didn't have a receipt showing I'd purchased the TV from their store, I couldn't leave with it. I said that I did have proof because I bought it online and collected it from their collection area. I showed her my confirmation email again, but she dismissed it, saying that wasn't a receipt and that anyone could fake an email. The accusation was insulting, especially with everyone staring at me. I'm black with a Caribbean accent, and I could feel the weight of their assumptions. But then an idea struck me. I told them that since they said I couldn't leave with my TV, then I wouldn't leave. I crossed my arms and stood there. The supervisor looked confused and asked what I meant. I explained that since they said I couldn't leave with the TV, I'd stay right there until they figured it out. And that's exactly what I did. I just stood there, blocking the till. The queue behind me grew longer and angrier. The other till wasn't moving much faster either, so the whole front of the store was backing up. Customers were grumbling, checking their watches, and shooting dirty looks at the staff. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. The supervisor kept looking at me nervously, probably wondering what to do. The cashier had gone silent, realizing she'd created this mess. The customers behind me were getting properly angry now. People in the queue started complaining about how long they'd been waiting and calling the situation ridiculous. When about 20 minutes of this standoff had passed, 2 more staff members came over. They huddled with the supervisor, whispering and occasionally looking at me. The supervisor approached me again and asked if she could have another look at my TV. She walked over to the trolley and really examined the TV box for the first time. Suddenly, her face went pale. She'd spotted something that made her realize her mistake. She noticed there was a name printed on the packaging, which meant this was definitely from an online order. Her voice had gone all high-pitched and squeaky when she apologized. She admitted I was right and that she should have checked the packaging first. I was still fuming mad. I told her she should have listened to me from the start instead of treating me like a thief. I pointed out that the whole thing was completely unnecessary. The supervisor walked off to the collection area to get me a proper receipt. The original cashier wouldn't even look at me when she scanned my remaining groceries, her head down in embarrassment. When the supervisor came back with the receipt, I wasn't done. I told her that next time maybe she should check her facts before accusing customers of stealing. I pointed out that she'd wasted everyone's time. When I was loading my groceries and TV into my car outside, 2 police officers approached me. Apparently, someone had called them during all the commotion. One of the officers said they'd had a report of a disturbance involving a possible theft. I explained the whole situation to them, showing them my receipt and confirmation email. They went inside to speak with the staff. When they came back out, they looked annoyed, but not with me. One officer told me they'd spoken to the store management and that what the staff did was completely inappropriate. They said the staff had no evidence of theft and no right to detain me. The other officer added that they'd warned the staff that if this had escalated further, they could have been charged with unlawful detention. He explained that the staff should have verified with their collection area before making any accusations. The officers were quite apologetic about the whole thing. They said the store staff had acted unprofessionally and that I'd handled the situation better than many people would have. I got home with my TV and groceries, but the excitement of my new purchase was overshadowed by the ridiculous drama. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.